This episode of Beers Beats Bailey is brought to you by Island Beer Chillin' Grill. Island Beer Chillin' Grill, established 2015. This place is pretty awesome. You should go. I totally recommend it. You could just go for a beer. It's right under IMAX. Go for a beer before or after. And you could, get some food, chill with some friends, That's Island Beer Chillin' Grill. So you could chill and grill.
Welcome, ladies and gents, to the very first episode, podcast, whatever, of Beers, Beats, and Baileys. Here we talk about movies, music, games, anime, and just basically anything that interests us. My name is Matthew Bailey. Alongside me is Ricardo Medina.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Ricardo Medina here. I'm just helping out Matthew with this little podcast. We don't know what this is right now. Yes, it's an experiment right now. We're just trying stuff out. We are on the IMAX right now. It's awesome. Yesterday we went to see a couple films. We saw Terminator Genisys, latest Terminator film. Last week we saw, Inside Out, the latest film by Pixar. Yeah, pretty damn good. But we'll talk about it a little later in the show. We also have Michael Richards with us, head of the, former head, sorry.
Yeah, hello. I'm Michael Richards, the current Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Animation Network. Also the CEO and Creative Director of Fast Track VFX Limited, which is a visual effects company based in Trinidad. And I've been also a filmmaker, one of the members of the team that did the Santana movie. So I have a little background in that as well as gaming, because I used to be a professional gamer as well. So I think I kind of fit in well in terms of all the topics we tend to cover. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, big gaming fan here as well. So hopefully we'll talk about that as well.
On again, off again gamer. I'm sorry, it's just time and stuff. But I'm getting back there. I'm trying to get back into that whole gaming vibe. But anyway, all right. So first we're gonna talk about Inside Out, which I've seen last week along with Ricardo. I'll let Ricardo more or less give you like a brief rundown as to what the film is about. Then he'll express his views on the film, what he liked, what he kind of didn't like. Well, although it's not that much probably non-existent, and then he'll pass it on to me, and then I'll give my point of view, and then afterwards we'll get on to the review that you guys have been waiting for, Terminator Genisys.
Yeah, so Inside Out, just a quick history. For me, Pixar has been really slipping in the last couple of years. They did sequels to films, and one of the big strengths about their storytelling is that they didn't need sequels. That's the thing. They did, and they've been hitting it out of the park since pretty much the first Toy Story. Every time something come out, boom, great, boom, great, boom, great. And for me, they really started hitting their stride. And in their overall, my favorite of their films is the Incredibles. This came out roughly 10 years ago. In my opinion, that film is fantastic. And then they just started hitting, boom, started doing stuff. And then after Wall-E, that is when things started getting a little shaky for me. What I would argue is that Toy Story 3 is so repetitive from Toy Story 2. It's almost identical films. And I actually think Toy Story 3 is pretty weak in that context, frankly. However, what happened with Pixar is you could tell, and if you look back, you could find a little history of Pixar where they talk about when they used to plan out the films, they used to sit down in bars and stuff like that in the early days. And basically, like, the last of their planning, in my opinion, was Wall-E, right? Everything after that was kind of like an afterthought, in my opinion. And then Up came out, and Up was good, but you could tell, for me, Up was like it was a divisive film for me, frankly. Up was it. Yeah, everybody consider Up like this. Everybody's only remember the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes of Up because of this really, really emotional sequence, this montage involving the old man and whatnot. That could have just been a short,
I don't necessarily agree with you on that point. Well, in terms of Up, the entire film to me has its emotional beats, right? The entire thing is not going to be as emotional as the intro, obviously, but overall, I think the overall story is very emotional. And in terms of what you were talking about with Pixar in general, one of the things that I believe it. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but there's the universal Pixar theory that says all the Pixar films actually belong to the same story in the same universe, right? And if you look at it from that point of view, right, you tend to see each film as a stepping stone in telling the overall story and not necessarily a film in itself. So when they do sequels and stuff like that, I don't necessarily expect it to be terribly original, but I intended to expand on the story that we know, right? So when you look at it from that point of view, I could see the value in each of the films, even though they may not have been all outstanding as some of the earlier films.
Yeah, no, well, the thing is, I don't take the universal Pixar theory too seriously. I mean, I know there's a lot of Easter eggs in Pixar films, A113, Pizza Planet, all these little jokes, and then they constantly reference other earlier stuff, other earlier movies. You'll probably find, Woody in the background somewhere or something like that. But again, for me, just the quality of the films with Up, it was a divisive kind of film for me. I didn't like the villain. The character motion and the motive didn't work. It had a lot of cool things in it, but it didn't appeal to me that much. It worked in the sense that, well, the old man had to let go, the house and whatnot. Great. Then they did what? What was after that? I think Cars 2, or what was after that?
I don't remember exactly what was after, but I know there was Brave.
Right. For me, Brave was a huge disappointment. Didn't like Brave. No story, didn't go anywhere for me. It didn't make any sense. It had potential. They just didn't do anything with it. Then they did, the sequels of Cars. Cars is an anomaly, and I get why Cars exists, because John Lasseter is a big fan of Cars. He just loves cars. So I totally get why it exists. And then, of course, marketing. You could sell all the toys, money to make, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and then there was Monsters University.
Right. They did the prequel to Monsters University, which I have not seen yet, and I heard is one of the most weakest of the films.
I've actually seen it, and I don't think it's that bad.
Right, but compared to the original Monsters Inc., what?
Well, of course, it's not going to match up to the original. Very few sequels ever match up to the original, with the exception of probably Terminator, right? Other than that, you don't necessarily go into a sequel expecting it to surpass the original.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing. The whole point of Pixar is that they keep things at a certain higher quality. One of the reasons, again, because sequels tend to be, almost entirely disastrous, you avoid it. You tell a good story, you tell your story, you end your story. We're happy with that. The one of the story, in the case of, Wall-E, you don't need a sequel to that. It had a great ending. You get a sense of where the humans would be going in the future in terms of coming back to Earth, all of that. Anyway, let us get to Inside Out about this. Yeah. Inside Out, big digression, but the point is to build up what it is, my big disappointment with Pixar so far, because especially in the light that Disney Animation Studio has been doing such a great job with their stuff. I love Brave. I'm sorry, not Brave. I love the Rapunzel film. Tangled. Right, the Disney animation stuff. Loved Tangled, loved Frozen. Right. Wreck-It Ralph, yeah, good films. And then I was like, what if Disney Animation Studios, what happened? All the talent went? What, you're not sure what's going on there. Then they come onto this, Inside Out. And my gosh, Pixar is back. I really, really love this film. This movie was fantastic for me. The movie, so it's an interesting film in the sense that every time you're dealing with science in this way, because it's a very neuroscientific film in the sense of this is how emotions work. We live in an age where it's not a poetic approach to how the mind works, right? But they did that. They did a good job of illustrating how the mind in this little girl works, right? Simple thing of her, it's just basically her shaking up in her life, a big shake up. She's becoming a teenager. She's entering puberty. The character is roughly 11, 12 or so. And the whole idea is that she is basically getting to see an approach of, say, the emotions within her mind. So these little homunculi, in her mind, just operating. One of them is operate as joy, sadness, disgust, anger, played by Louis Bach, which is perfectly casted, by the way. Perfect voice acting. Voice acting is fantastic. Amy Poehler's the voice for Joy. Yeah. And again, I really enjoyed this one because it paced that so well. And then they had a lot of... It's a very smart film. Now, the director of this film, he did... What's his last one? I think Up. This is... Pete Docter. Pete Docter is... He also did, I think, Monsters, Inc., if I remember correctly. I'd probably look it up online. Right, and Pete Docter, in my opinion, is kind of a genius because the thing with good art, especially when you're dealing with material like this, especially when you're dealing with scientific material, is that you have to appeal on a quote-unquote intuitive level, a non-scientific level. I'm not supposed to think about, well, this is the anticipial cortex or whatever it is. Yeah. You're not supposed to think about that. You're supposed to be, all right, this is emotional, it's internal, it's a thing, and you get that this girl is going through this.
You don't want any details.
Yeah, you don't need, but at the same time, it did feed into a lot of great scientific stuff, which I appreciated a lot. So they had like this whole section in called Abstract Thought, which was awesome and hilarious. Oh, by the way, quick side note: the little workers that working in the mind of the girl, they were better than the minions from Despicable Me by far. Way funnier. Yeah, way funnier. They just had this dry, unemotional wit about them. Totally stoic. It's like, yeah, we just workers, we just, engineers, just operating, just technicians, just, all right, memories, all right, throw it out. Like, no emotional weight to it, anything like that. And they were the funniest thing. They had some really clever stuff in terms of, like, what they do, in terms of how dream operation, and then that interpretation of that. So you could appreciate it on somewhat of a scientific level in that sense. Because, in my opinion, that's how it felt to me. Again, it had a bunch of fallacies, like the homunculi fallacies, how come emotions have emotions. But then it built into the whole narrative of this is just a driving force in the mind. And you could do a good job with that. Again, it's not meant to be absolutely scientifically accurate. That's not the point. It's just about pacing it and getting a good sense of what works. Right? And that's it. It's not blatantly ridiculous. Because you get a good sense of development in the character. And then they did the idea of what an internal crisis of the mind would be like. She's a little girl. I don't want to spoil anything of what occurs, but basically it's something that a person at that age doing is a very big deal for them. Yeah. Right? She does, through the stress and trauma of her life. Yeah. Through the stress and internal problems in her life, she will, have this issue. And again, I give this film, just to go with a quick rating, right, get this film on IMAX. You spend your money, go IMAX to see it. It is very, very good. You spend your money. It is very well done. Pixar is back. Not since, I'll say I didn't enjoy this since probably Ratatouille. Right? Ratatouille is one of my favorite Pixar films. Again, it's one of those films that, we'll talk about Ratatouille, where, it was normal until the last 10 minutes of Ratatouille. Oh, yeah. If anybody, like Peter O'Toole's, anybody remember Peter O'Toole's very awesome speech, and then the pacing of that's why Ratatouille gets a near perfect score for me. Same thing. This one was really well done. It paced itself well. It did a lot of great foreshadowing. It was really smart. They had like great jokes for adults. Little kind of rude, risky jokes as well. Like in the beginning, they had a joke about a bear in San Francisco. If anybody gets that, you have to be an adult to get it. I was like, wow, they did this, but it's smart. They did stuff like they made a Chinatown reference. Yeah, like just hilarious. Yeah. Like that iconic line. Right. Yeah, and they made a Chinatown reference. They did this stuff with abstract thought, and then they made a reference to cubism. So, like, when the characters, you'll see the section. And it's like, wow, they did actually, spend a lot of time understanding art history, understanding, art theory, these kind of things. So how the mind is work internally, and that's it. So I totally recommend Inside Out. I had a lot of fun with it. Not since Ratatouille I enjoyed WALL-E, but I don't enjoy it as much as, say, Ratatouille. Not since Ratatouille I enjoyed Inside Out. So people, I totally recommend going see Inside Out. It is worth your money. Go see this film. It's fantastic. One of the best films for the year.
All right. I totally agree with him. It is hands down one of the best movies I've seen this year. I loved it for the animation. I loved it for the characters, the story, which honestly I went into it. I wasn't even sure what to expect. So for me, I avoided the trailers. I really didn't want to know much about it. So going into it, I was like, okay, this is just emotions inside this little girl's head. But all right, let's see where the story goes. And then, it takes this really emotional stance on how this girl feels due to the situation that she goes through in the film. And, I couldn't help but relate to it as well, too. I mean, it's not like I went through the same thing that she went through, but, when you get older and, certain things that appeal to you, certain things that you loved, growing up, you either forget about it or they just don't have that much emotional resonance to you, Only a few things, like, especially when it comes to family, they stick with you, but eventually as you do become older, they become, less important. And that really stood out to me, It's really like how life is, You get older and the things that you really want to hold on to, eventually you just kind of grow out of it, And I liked how they presented it in the film, I like, honestly, a lot of reviewers will say that they got a little teary-eyed Well, I normally don't cry at movies, but I got a little incy-wincy, little teary-eyed, but I related to that a lot, you know. But I would agree, at the end of the day, yeah. Solid movie, probably one of the most original movies I've seen in a long while. Characters were great. The levels that he went to from, you know, emotional, technical, story-wise, everything was just on point. And yeah, for me, I would give it a 4.5 stars. Definitely see this movie. I would agree with Ricardo, you know, see it in IMAX, see it wherever, but, you know, just see it as soon as, because it's really one of the best.
Yeah, no, this emotionally it wrecked me, eh? Like, holy crap. Here's the thing. Sorry to say it, I have a kind of bit of a sociopath side to me. I just almost never cry when you have a fictitious cry. When I read the news and I see some story and that's sad, I'll cry about that because it's a real person. But it was there. It was getting there because it had some moments really well done. I would argue, again, not a perfect film, but it had a little pacing issues here or there with respect to the emotions and whatnot. But it worked. Still one of the better ones. I mean, I really, really hope Pixar, this is a second stride for Pixar and they just keep up ramping up everything. But I was excited for this one. I was like, all right, Pixar coming back with an interesting premise, interesting concept. You know, it's one, again, as Matthew put it, it's one of the more original premises. It's something, you know, we've seen it many times before in many fiction. The idea of, you know, the remote control in your brain, that stuff. But they did a good job of, again, representing a lot of things like that. Again, it had a nice little sequence at the end where the console is going grey. And I thought that was a really good representation of, say, apathy, for example, or something like that. And, you know, a lesser filmmaker would have made apathy an actual emotion to talk about, or they'd have a villain in it. The film doesn't have that. You know, it's just this girl is going through some bad times in her life, and it's represented in a certain way. The world was a character on its own. So you got a representation of the world breaking down. The pit itself, they had this pit in the storyline. Also, on a slight spoiler about what it is, but that was a character on its own. It wasn't a manifested, personified villain like the main characters, Joy and Sadness, and these characters were. That worked. That worked very well with this film. That's one of the reasons why I really like this film, because it just decided to go a little step above. You know, and then because it had all these little small references and joke, you could tell a lot of care went into this. They really, really took their time with this one. Michael, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, and for me, most Pixar films lately, I tend to usually watch them at home rather than going out to the cinema. So you say, like, see it in IMAX, but there's a reason it's not showing in IMAX, right? It's not geared towards the general audience, right? And nothing is wrong with that, right? Because if I'm watching a Pixar film, which are usually family films, I tend to want to be in the comfort of my home with my kids watching the film, right? So I probably will still see it, you know, but I'll see it at home, as opposed to going out to cinemas and seeing it. The other thing, you mentioned the director. He was the one who wrote the story for WALL-E. He worked on Toy Story, Monsters, Inc. Up. He's currently in pre-production on Toy Story 4. And I know you hate sequels because Toy Story 3 was successful and it made money. And at the end of the day, we need to understand it in the context of the business as well. Right? But I'm just saying, in as much as you have seen the progression of this director over a number of films, then it's hopeful to see what will come in Toy Story 4. Right?
No, here's my thing with Toy Story. Okay, so again, I'm going to be a bit cynical about Toy Story as a franchise. Toy Story is entirely dependent on the nostalgia of the first film. I am sorry. The second film I really liked. It was solid. It was a good sequel. It made sense in terms of the progression of, especially the Woody character. We could focus on Woody and him as a quote-unquote retro character and that whole aspect and that whole world around that. But the third film was really a repeat of the second film, and I had a serious problem with that. And the people who just keep touting Pixar as the best thing, and I use the word circle jerk, dick riding, that stuff. No, it's adults. It's not kids. It's people who just had a memory. They were 20 years younger when the first Toy Story came out, and or 15 years ago, whatever it is, and they were that age. And Toy Story 3 was just, well, we're moving on and getting older. And I'm sorry, Toy Story, unlike Inside. Now here's the thing. Again, people could call me out for a hypocrite here, but to me, Toy Story really feels like it just pushes emotional buttons in a cynical way, whilst Inside Out came across more genuine, in my opinion. Now, it's quite possible it's my bias. I'm sure of that. However, Inside Out just felt like it had more care to it. It gave a better sense of illusion, whilst Toy Story didn't do that for me. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the original Toy Story. Toy Story for me was impressive just from a technical standpoint. It's like, whoa, this is 3D cartoon. They're doing this so impressive. When I was a kid, that was kind of mind blowing when you think about it. Right? It had nothing like that when it came out. You could totally understand why it is as popular as it is. But then they started really like ramping up the stories. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Finding Nemo, again, quite impressive. I was kind of really impressed by that. The one, again, the film that pulled me in totally was The Incredibles. That was the one. Again, it totally catered to my superhero bias. They were really cynical about all the superhero jokes and talk. So why Pixar works is that they understand a global sense of writing and how to appeal to audiences in that mass sense, in that way. Yeah. But as I said, look, Inside Out, again, because I'm a big fan of neuroscience and all that stuff and learning about how the mind works, psychology and all that stuff, I think that's where Inside Out just hit me in the right place. It did a good job in that sense. So that's why I give it such a high rating.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna wrap this podcast up for now. For the second one, we're actually gonna go in depth with Terminator Genisys. But just in closing, in terms of Inside Out, if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you do in the big screen, or if you want to, just wait till it comes out in small screen. But apart from it, like everyone, like what Ricardo's been saying, it's really a great movie. I would vouch for that. I highly recommend you check it out as soon as possible. And yeah, any last words?
Yeah, no. Again, just go see it. It's awesome. I recommend it. It was really smart. It's one of those great balance films where, kids will love it, but adults could appreciate it. Because it had all the little sneaky little jokes they put in for adults. It was good. Little references, little stuff in the background, little references, again, as I said, reference to art, reference to science, a lot of stuff out there. So, yeah, now we'll move on to Terminator Genisys. Yeah. Yeah, so shout out again to Island Beer Chill and Grill, established 2015. There's a nice little place right on the IMAX. So just come and just take in some little...
Second floor.
Yeah, just come down at the bottom, right on the IMAX, and just take in a beer, or two. Not bad. And yeah, it's a cool...
Where can we contact you, Ricardo?
Right.
If you want to send any heat comments on your thoughts on Toy Story, seeing you didn't like it, where can we find you on Facebook or Twitter where you can say, hey, get you, man.
Right, so you could yell at me in all caps on Twitter at rmedi. You could catch me there, and then just type Ricardo Medina. It's the most important Ricardo Medina you can find on Facebook. Probably there's a boxer somewhere. I'm sure you don't count, but yeah, so you could contact me there. Any little private messages, and that's my social networking. And you, Michael, where can we contact you?
Yeah, well, I'm all over the net, but you'll find me under the name Fast Track. That's PHASTRAQ, just because I like to be different. All right. So you can find me on my website, fasttrackvfx.com, or you can find me on Facebook at fasttrackvfx.com, Twitter as well. It's a unique name. You can't miss it. Right.
Well, you can find me. All right. Well, I have my blog page. So that's legallyblack.wordpress.com. You could find me also on Facebook at a Legally Black blog. If you have any comments about this podcast here, or if you want to check through any reviews I've done before, you could just, leave a comment or two.
Well, that was a quick wrap up for this first tryout podcast. Good night, everyone. Good morning, good day, good evening, or whenever you're listening to this, whatever time. You're not probably listening to this live, I'm sure. So whenever. And thank you.
Tell me I'm wrong. Would I be forgiven? I wanna walk like you, swinging it back when I want.
All right, so we just have a second run now. Matthew, just want to introduce this film we're going to be doing, a film we saw yesterday of this recording, a film called Terminator Genisys. And yeah, boy, we have opinions about this one. Yeah, I'm waiting in the yin-yang. We also have Michael Richards with us. Michael Richards, Matthew, just quick introduction, Matthew as well, and then Michaal, and then we'll start. I am Ricardo Medina. Ricardo Medina, you can contact me, quick contact. You could contact me on Twitter at rmedi on Twitter. And Ricardo Medina, probably the most important Ricardo Medina you'll find on Facebook. You could contact there. And Matthew, where can I contact you? Where can we contact you and meet you online?
I have my own blog page. You could find it at legallyblack.wordpress.com. You could also search for the official Facebook page. Just type in a Legally Black blog, and you should find it there.
And Michael?
Yeah, I'm Michael Richards. You can find me at fasttrackvfx.com. That's PHASTRAQVFX.com. As well as on Facebook at fasttrackvfx, and Twitter you can find me as fasttrack.
All right. So this is going to be doing a run through of Terminator Genisys. Matthew, you have to start with this because I need some steam to blow from this one. This one had a few problems, to say the least. Start, Matthew.
All right. So before my colleague Ricardo blows steam off of this movie, all right. As a personal fan of the series, I mean, like I love the first two movies. Second movie, in my opinion, is honestly like the greatest action movie of all time, in my opinion. Even better than Die Hard, even better than Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know. It was just a revelation for me in terms of visual effects, in terms of cinematography, storytelling, direction. Acting, you know, I mean, the acting was passable for what it was. I mean, it placed Arnold Schwarzenegger, the lead actor, on a higher level than how he was in the first movie. So for those who were living under a rock for the past 21 years, Terminator, the original one, was a film that was written and directed by James Cameron. Legendary. Well, there's this whole legend that it came to him one night while he was sleeping. He was trying to come up with an idea for a project. He had this nightmare of this robot from the future actually coming to kill him. And I'm not sure if that's actually true or not. But the point is, he got the financial backing to make this film through Orion Pictures. He got the help of special effects wizard Stan Winston, who's no longer with us, rest in peace. And he also casted Arnold Schwarzenegger, who 2 years ago starred in Conan the Barbarian, which I honestly think is one of his best movies. The result was an iconic film where we had, basically a machine from the future came back in time to 1984 to kill the character of Sarah Connor, which was played by Linda Hamilton. The idea being is that she would give birth to this military leader by the name of John Connor, who would eventually wipe out the machines, who at the, around the time of 2027, or, at least the decade before that, was basically set on just wiping out all of humanity. All right, so part 2 came out in 1991, bigger cast, bigger budget, bigger crew, bigger everything. Everything was just literally pushed to the limit, and also what really made the film stand out for me, what really was special, was that they took the same antagonist of the first film and made him good. In this case, he was reprogrammed to protect Sarah, who grew up, and John, who was a 10-year-old kid who was played by Edward Furlong. Don't know if he's acting or not, but whatever. And machines from the future actually sent another Terminator back in time. He was the T-1000. He was played by Robert Patrick. Iconic performance as well too. And unlike the normal Terminator, which is just human flesh on top of metal, this guy was liquid metal. And his hands, he basically used to turn into like blades. And he was just really like same focus on like how the first one was from before, which was just kill and just move on. All right, so that one basically was a masterpiece in my opinion. Won a couple of Oscars, of course, for visual effects. And then the franchise practically just, I wouldn't say died, it just more or less just disappeared. And then suddenly 2003, the third one came out. And I would honestly defend the movie. I actually think it's good for what it was. Michael and Ricardo will disagree with me, and I mean they will say why. But I actually liked what they tried to do with it. It was somewhat a parody of the first two movies. They were aware that yes, we're doing the same things all over again. We're having Arnold come in and do the same stuff as before. But what was really interesting that they actually decided to bring in a female Terminator now, the TX. She was played by Christina Loken. Yeah, Kristana, right. I thought it was Christina, right. Kristana Loken. And for the most part, she did her role. I mean, she did what she did what the director asked. She did what the script required of her. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow. It wasn't directed by James Cameron. I'm not sure if he had any involvement in it at the time. But I mean, James Cameron was on a roll. I mean, he did like Titanic and other big budget pictures. Well, all right. Well, Terminator 3 was. He wrote it. Okay, so he all right. He had one of the writers. All right, well, he credited as a writer. Okay, I'm not sure if he likes the film now in retrospect, but you know that's his point of view. Well, the film received mixed reviews, but I still liked what he did with it. I also liked the conclusion, we'll spoil it, which is that the idea of Judgment Day, which was the machines became aware and actually launched missiles at Russia, and then Russia responded with more missiles back to the States, and it just caused this. Everything just practically got wiped out. And then the machines finally took over, and then war began. Instead of... They more or less kind of pushed aside what happened in part 2, where they more or less stopped the Judgment Day from happening. Or, in this case, they delayed it. So now in the end of part 3, we literally see, Judgment Day actually happen, And from there, okay, I was thinking, well, okay, Judgment Day happened, okay, is this going to be the end? Because to me, that would have been a pretty much good end for the trilogy, if they were going for a trilogy. Instead, in 2009, we got Terminator Salvation. And I wasn't that excited by it. I wasn't that hyped by it, to be honest. I mean, yeah, they had Christian Bale, and he was coming off of, Batman Begins and Dark Knight, which were big movies to me. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So no, right. So Matthew, good run through of the film franchises. Again, for me, the first film is a sci-fi classic. It's very well done. Nice high concept premise that works well. Arnold Schwarzenegger, even though he's a terrible actor, he works perfectly as an unemotional robot. He fitted very well in this film. Love the first film, and for its budget, a very low budget film. It's very low budget, but it works very well. I actually rewatched it just to enjoy the franchise. I forgot how much I love this franchise. How well paced this is, how well done it was, how that first film. Second film is a bit of a repeat of the first one, a little bit, but it's one of those things that you got the feeling that, well, hey, we got a lot of cash now. What are we going to do with this? Yeah. And they gave us a great film. Then the third film, which was for me a colossal waste of time. Seriously, this third film was such a disappointment. Little of it made sense. They repeated the second film in the worst ways. Kristanna Loken, she's supposed to be the unemotional one, but she doesn't hold a candle to Robert Patrick. And again, you get the sense that, again, I don't understand these people with this franchise, and we'll talk about this with this film. The robots supposed to be more advanced, but yet they're worse somehow. They're less efficient somehow. Yeah. And the only thing she had was, well, she could control cars and trucks now. Okay. I suppose that's useful, but whatever. Then the fourth film is a film I don't hate that much, frankly, compared to the third film. I will disagree. But the fourth film is a film that the problem with it is that it was a baffling film from a marketing standpoint. When I went into this film, again, because Christian Bale playing John Connor and he just came off of the Batman films. I think it was Dark Knight, actually. It was right before this. And Dark Knight was huge. Dark Knight was, this blockbuster atomic bomb of a film that for a lot of people in pop culture.
It was like the Mount Everest of
it was at the time. Everybody was really blown away by the Dark Knight. Right. No, but for me, I really like the Dark Knight. He was coming off of something that was very successful, and so in your head you were thinking, this film going to be really good, and so and blah blah blah. Utterly mediocre, but it was baffling from just an editing standpoint. And then you realize, wait. Sam Worthington is the star of this film, not Christian Bale. Christian Bale was the side character, and that confused the hell out of me watching that. The whole film, I was like, what? Why this? What? Who? What? What? And then on top of that, again, the same stupidity we've seen with Genisys. Oh, by the way, I'm just gonna just put this out there. The marketing people for the Terminator franchise seriously need to be taken out back and shot in the head. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. These people constantly spoil these films. Now, again, with the original Terminator, they did that, In Terminator 2, they spoiled the fact that Arnold is a good guy this time, right? But as a kid, I don't know. And again, I'll say because it's a different landscape in terms of entertainment and in terms of access to promo materials and that kind of stuff, that wasn't a big deal. Because the probability of you seeing a trailer and just encountering a trailer, how many times you would see the trailer? The trailer was perfectly designed in such a way at the time for you to say, cool, this is what's going on, right? So the idea of a spoiler and how the audience would remember something wasn't a big deal. But today, we live in the internet age. Sorry to say it. So you put out any little thing, you have people nowadays who freeze frame stuff and pick up and so this now was just blatant. And it's a big problem in the age of Terminator 4 and Terminator 5. And yeah, so I just want to dice into the little history of it and raise some opinions of it. And I'm just going to get into Michael of what he thinks about just about the franchise, and then we'll get into the actual film itself.
Right. I agree with some of what both of you all said, but I disagree with some of it as well. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Terminator franchise from inception. Right. It's one of the films that inspired me to get into my profession as a visual effects artist. Right. And especially the second film. And for many reasons, it was a landmark film in terms of visual effects, because that's the film where they basically perfected the effect from the abyss. And they brought it into a new way of storytelling where we actually saw a CG character being a main character in the film, right? Which wasn't really done before, you know? I mean, you have little bits and pieces here and there, but this film starred a CG character, right? I mean, Robert Patrick is a fantastic actor. He did justice to the role, but really it's all about the fact that he was liquid metal, right? All the greatest shots of the film is that, right? So for many reasons, the second film stands as the pinnacle of the Terminator series, pinnacle of many series, as a matter of fact, because I don't think any other sequel has ever had that such a great leap from the first film into the second film as Terminator 2 did, right? With Terminator 3, I don't know why that film was made. I guess from a marketing standpoint, they sat down and said, you know, what haven't we done yet? And it's like, we could put a female Terminator. And that was the end of the discussion, because there's no purpose whatsoever of that film in terms of the storytelling, in terms of new technology, in terms of doing anything to make me justify the money I spent to see it, right? So I prefer to believe the third film didn't happen. It was just a bad dream in an alternate timeline, right? Terminator 4 had its redeeming qualities. I personally did not like Christian Bale's performance in that. I felt he was still in the character of Batman for some reason, and it didn't work.
Apparently we need to cure Christian Bale of throat.
Yeah,
still has throat cancer.
Yeah, whole movie I was like, somebody get him on a strep cells, because why it's speaking like that? That it didn't make sense for this film for him to be like that.
Apparently John Connor picked up a terrible smoking
Apparently, right? I personally didn't have an issue with the Sam Worthington character being the lead. I think it worked for what the film was. It was a satisfying conclusion for me, right? But overall, it does not compare to the rest of films in the franchise, and that's to be expected, right? As for Terminator Genisys, I think they did a lot of smart things in this one in terms of bringing back some of the shots from the original and bringing back some of the same feeling from the original. And they actually pulled a X-Men Days of Future Past by going back and wiping out the third film. You know, it's like, that never happened. There's an alternate timeline, so we're in a new playing field. And I like that idea, because this is the film that first started getting you into the whole crossing multiple timelines thing and stuff like that. Right? That said, the series has never been perfect. I have always had issues with certain parts of the science of Terminator, right? But I think they more or less rectified some of it in Terminator Genisys, right? So we can move on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I actually agree with both guys with regards to Part 4. I mean, it had a redeeming qualities. I like the idea of seeing how the future was. And the funny thing is, like, I actually looked at it a few days ago, and it's not the future that we've seen in the first 3 movies. It's actually a couple of years before. We see John Connor, we see Kyle Reese, which is a guy that came in the first movie to save Sarah, and then actually impregnated her before he got killed. You know, that's a long story. But I don't know, there just really wasn't much going in terms of story. I find the characters were flat. It's just, I don't know, it's just, they kind of relied a lot of, okay, this is John Connor, he's an important man. Just remember that, he's an important man. Kyle Reese, he's an important man. But, you know, because there wasn't that much characterization to go with it, you didn't really get a sense of why they were important. I mean, even if you saw the first 2 movies, and it's like, okay, why should I care about Christian Bale here? Why should I care about the guy who plays Kyle Reese? And then, well, I would admit the interesting character was Sam Worthington. I mean, but even him, they didn't really do much with him. But I liked how it was all set up where you saw the three characters, and then but as soon as they came together, it's like, where do we go from here? I know, let's just bring in a CG Arnold that looks similar to how he looked in the first one. And the audience will cheer and, make noise, which is what it did. Yeah, but, like in retrospect, it's like, okay, what's happening here? Is this CG Arnold going to go to 1984? Did they hint at it at all? What's at stake, really? There wasn't really anything at stake. It's just, okay, get this guy before the machines get at him. But, yeah, so to me, that's why 4 is honestly the worst of the bunch. Which leads me to part 5, which is Genisys, or Geniuses as I call it. I agree with Michael. I like the visual homages to the first 2 movies. Well, in case you didn't know, they more or less recreate shot-for-shot moments from the first film. For example, when Arnold Schwarzenegger comes in for the first time as the Terminator, when he meets up with the punks, and there's this whole fight with them. But in this case, there's another Terminator in the film, which is also played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, the real one in this case, a much older version, and he's actually there in time. Well, sorry, he's there actually waiting for the first Terminator to show up, and then there's this really nice little fist fight scene between the two. Also, another drastic change that they made in this one is that Sarah Connor, in this case played by Emilia Clarke, who you should know from the Game of Thrones series. She's prepared. She's a badass this time. She's more resourceful. She could actually hold her own, and she's actually prepared when it comes to these Terminators showing up. And then they actually do something quite interesting, which is that Kyle Reese shows up, and this time it's played by Jai Courtney, which for some reason doesn't work in terms of casting. I'm not sure why he's there, but I'll let Ricardo get into that. So there's a moment in the very first movie, where as soon as Kyle Reese shows up, there's a cop that chases him. And in this movie here, Genisys, the cop turns out to be a T-1000. So he's similar to how Robert Patrick's character was, where not only is he a liquid metal Terminator, but he also poses as this policeman. And that was really cool. And I like the little moments, the little changes that they did there. And, to me, quoting Ricardo here, it was fan service. It was really for the fans of the first 2 movies. And I was into it. But then, unfortunately, this was spoiled in the second and third trailers for Genisys. John Connor, the character of John Connor, who is played by Jason Clarke, in the future shows back up in another time, which is 2017, as this hybrid Terminator, half human, half machine hybrid kind of thing. Cyborg, yeah. I don't want to call him a cyborg, yeah. I really don't want to call him a cyborg, but anyway, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then there's this whole little twist with him and him being part of Skynet now, wanting to take over the world and all that kind of stuff. And to me, I felt that if they hadn't spoiled it already in the trailer, that would have been a really brilliant twist. But because it was spoiled, and, I was thinking that the film at least would have given us a bit more twist, or at least a bit, kind of throw us off a little bit in terms of what the story was going to be. But unfortunately, I don't know, it's just... They just kind of ran out of steam, and they just tried to put more ideas on top of more ideas. And then it's like, okay, well, you still have to be familiar with what's going on with the first 2. But, at the point in time, it just becomes really convoluted, And, yeah, at the end of the day, I kind of felt it was a bit of a mess. I mean, it started off promising. I was in on it from the beginning in terms of, okay, seeing how the timeline was changed. But then it just started to get a little bit more confusing. And I felt that, if they hadn't revealed that whole twist to begin with, and B, if they just try to make it less convoluted and try to make a lot more sense of this already weird, convoluted story already about time travel, we would have had a better film. But I'm going to let Ricardo, continue this.
No, yeah. All right. So I just want to mention something about Jai Courtney. You notice a pattern with him? So the last film had a mediocre Australian actor coming and messing up the franchise. This time, we have another mediocre Australian actor. Except he did it twice. On the 5th film of a loved franchise, what did he do to it? Die Hard. Which was a complete waste of my time. My gosh, I hated Die Hard 5. No, yeah, easily one of the worst. And this one, okay, so here's the thing. Anybody ever watched the Sarah Connor Chronicles? Yes.
I didn't, unfortunately.
No. So the Sarah Connor Chronicles is a solid franchise. Not the best. It had a little issues here or there, but it was solid. It had a good cast, good acting, and good storytelling.
Also a Game of Thrones Sarah Connor.
Right, yeah, and we had Lena, right, yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the sad part, and this is why this film pisses me off probably most out of the entire franchise, is that this one had the most potential. This one had so many good ideas in it, so many good premises in it, so many good concepts put forward in it that's relatively new to the franchise. And it works and fits very well within the franchise, right, these ideas. And they just squandered it on this film. This could have easily been, I think, how many seasons Sarah Connor Chronicles got? 2 seasons, I think? I think it was 2 seasons. So this could have been a great 3rd season to that franchise.
Because you could have tied in.
Thank you. Yeah, they could have taken this. Yeah, they could have taken this and have it and just space out the point. One of the big problems with this film is the pacing, because they had so many ideas and they just didn't know how to pace these ideas out well. A lot of it didn't make sense. It didn't have any emotional resonance for me. It didn't pace forward well for me, and I was like, yeah, all they just wasting this though.
I actually want to add something to that.
No, they just, this was, and it's an incredible shame of this film. No, Jai Courtney. Again, a bit of a bane to me, because again, he's just this generic white scowling badass douche that have no emotion, no talent as an actor, and he just really didn't need to be here. They hadn't to play Sarah Connor. Seriously, cast somebody else. I just want to get into a couple points about the film. And okay, so Terminator was, let's admit it, in almost all storytelling, virtually every storytelling, I think probably with the exception of the film Primer, time travel is next to impossible to make coherent. Sorry to say it. Nobody ever made time travel coherent in a storytelling, even since the first film. It always... No, Back to the Future was a mess too. Every one of them always had a problem with it.
Actually, the one film that has ever gotten time travel right is Hot Tub Time Machine, ironically enough.
Probably. I never you see the second one. I only saw the first one.
What's the second one? The first one actually got it right.
Got it, kind of, yeah. To me, it never really made sense. How he sent back his friend to be the father of him. And whatever, we didn't care. No one cares, because still the first Terminator worked. And again, when you do a good and you make a good film, one of the reasons why I like Christopher Nolan so much is that even though your stuff incoherent, when you actually think about it, a good film would not make you focus on that, right? And you could still defend the film even watching it over, right? This film, if you're picking up these problems while watching the movie for the first time, that's a sad sign. And this film had some serious... No, this film had some serious problems in that way. Again, poor pacing, poor editing, the acting was just dry. I like Emilia Clarke. She's nice dragon lady showing she tits ever so often on HBO. Great, right? No, but nice dragon woman. Like her, she just didn't work in this. The material, she couldn't use the material well. And because a lot of this stuff was like just a cobbled together mess that you could tell that it was like a whole season of a show put together in one film, and they just squeeze everything together. Nothing came across well for me. And I'm just going to finish with just I'm just going to tell my rating quick, and then I'll get on to you. It was sad in the sense of I just had problems with respect to... Now, the last film, it's sequel baited, right? This Terminator 4. They clearly designed it to be a new trilogy, which I would have liked to see. I would like to see that. I would like to see, what the war would have play out like, or at least one interpretation or one branching timeline of the war play out like. I actually would like to see that. So I didn't mind when that sequel baited, but this one was the most lazy bullshit ever. And the only time you sequel bait is if you expect to get a sequel. And I really hope this film does poorly in the box office. From what I understand, it's doing very badly. I'm glad. Sorry. I have the schadenfreude for that. I just want this film to fail, because this was some lazy bullshit. I am sorry, people. This film, I had some serious problems with. So it had a whole bunch of plot stuff in it that just paced poorly. I did not like this movie. Not because it was an intrinsically horrible film. I actually put it in quality-wise roughly on the same, if as a simple single product, roughly 3 and 4. Same domain. Not as bad as 3. 3 still is the worst. But yeah, She was supposed to, because again, she was like, yeah, well, just waste my time. But this one is because of the is the potential. It's like an abortion. It's like this, what it could have been. The utter tragedy of it in that sense. Like, my gosh, they just waste this, Dread. They just waste a good chance with this movie. I am sorry. I ain't going to give him a rating yet. I want to let Michael speak. He's smiling at me. And he telling me, you have the sarcastic smile. You want to let me have it. So,
right. I disagree with a lot of what you just said. Going into this film, actually I disagree with something you said earlier too about the trailer spoiling the film. Right? Going into this film, as a huge fan of the franchise, my expectations was really high when they announced it. Right? Then I started seeing trailers come out, and at first I was like, maybe it will be good, maybe it'll not be good, because I was still feeling the effects of 3 and 4. Right? So I deliberately kept my expectations low. At the moment I saw that first trailer where they showed that John Connor was now a Terminator, my mind was blown. And here's why. Because that said to me that they were not afraid to try something new in the film, which is what was one of the biggest problems with 3 and 4. I'm getting to my point, right? I'm just saying that is when I really started to become excited about this film. So my expectations rose again going into this film, and it was at the point where I personally just said, I have to see this in IMAX, right? I know you're probably not going to give it that rating, but that was how I felt when I saw that trailer. And honestly, going into the film, my expectations were high, but I think they actually surpassed my expectations in what could have been done with the story, right? I agree that there are certain elements that is all about the forthcoming sequels, but that's fine because I think there was enough put into the film to please both the fans and still tell a good story, as opposed to the previous films that was all about, let's see how much money we could grab and get out of it, right? I think they actually took the time to try and right some of the wrongs of the storylines in the previous films, right? And they did it in clever ways where they basically know that a lot of the time travel science was wrong in the first 2 films, right? And there wasn't much you could do about it. And they came back and actually justified some of it with more pseudoscience. But at the same time, they did pay attention to it and didn't just ignore it like the last 2 films, right? So, like, going back in time with the whole thing about the liquid metal robot being able to go back in time never made sense in T2, right? It probably still doesn't make sense in this film, but at least they tried to address some of that, right? So, on that grounds, I think the writing was actually better than I expected it to be in terms of story, because having seen Terminator 3 and 4, I was at a loss at what they could possibly come up with that would reinvigorate me to want to see the film, right? So I don't agree with you when you say it's one of the worst films ever. It's not one of the worst films, right? From a story point, I'll give them credit for at least attempting to right some of the wrongs, right? How successful they were, it may not be as successful as we would like, but considering they had 3 and 4 to deal with, I think they did a fantastic job.
Right. So, okay, so my counterpoint to this is simple. It's a spoiled brat counterpoint. What I mean by that, we live in an age of, a kind of a golden age of television. We have an expected standard for storytelling. And I'll admit, Hollywood right now, especially when dealing with big sci-fi franchises like this, have a massive disadvantage. How are you going to tell a good story within 2.5 hours? How are you going to tell a good story within 3 hours? Even 3 hours. And they understand the marketing and the reality of, people not going to sit down in a theater for 3 hours plus, unless you're a super nerd or whatever. It's one of the reasons why Avengers Age of Ultron was the way it was. Slightly disappointing film because of a strange edit. Simple things like that. And that's just a recent example. We've seen it time immemorial in Hollywood. So we live in a spoiled brat age where you need stories to spell out itself and pace itself out over a season. Again, this film had great ideas. If it was the 3rd season of Sarah Connor Chronicles and it did this arc and fleshed out all of those ideas and paced it properly, it would have been awesome. It would have gotten rave reviews for me, and I'd be going on my Netflix or BitTorrent if I'm lazy enough, not give a shit. I don't feel to pay $7.99 a month today. This wrongs. Torrent that, whatever. I'd sit down and get the material out. It had good ideas, and that's for me why it hurts so much. It's because of the wasted potential. That's the point I'm trying to make. It had great ideas. They had Doctor Who in it.
Exactly.
Matt Ridley, awesome, and it was a great, bring in, because the idea of Skynet and Skynet's personality is never clear, right? Terminator 4 had Skynet as this chick, and it was only because that's the girl the guy knows. he met this doctor girl. Oh God, I can't remember the character because the movie was so bland, and Sabo Newton was incredibly bland. Right, but the point is that they had great ideas of what this film could have been. Now, here's one of the big things about this. A simple example. In my head, when Terminator 1 and 2 played out, you get the sense of Skynet was super desperate, right? Super desperate to get time travel. It's this time travel thing. In this movie, it was just casual. They just walk in, okay, mashing up, blah, blah, blah. I would have paced that. There's a simple example of how, like, let's say it was a season. Again, this is my Captain Hindsight moment here, right? Yeah, Captain Hindsight moment here. How I'd have paced it is that you have, like, say they're getting up to go to deal with Skynet. I'd have where Skynet just do a last desperate move of putting this mission in this one Terminator head, and that Terminator would have, like, the whole of humanity was chasing this fucking thing down, and it this big desperate fight, and then it get to the time travel and win and get away. And then it's not that John Connor, again, you could defend that by saying, well, this is a different timeline and John Connor knew blah, blah, blah. I'd have liked to see the original timeline of that, of how desperate that tactic by Skynet was. It didn't come across that desperate at all. It just John Connor just there waiting. And he let it happen. Again, much like with, you know what's a movie that reminds me like this? Lazy bullshit sequel baiting. What's the Alien movie? Not AVP. The shitty one Ridley Scott that came out 2012. That was, I want to wipe from my mind. I bleach my mind. Prometheus, thank you. Lazy bullshit. Lazy bullshit sequel baiting. I set unanswered questions, and well, you're gonna find out in 2 years, right? No, I'm sorry. You do not design unless you have good material going, like say the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where I like the product on its own, but you're giving stuff for me to wait on. Don't leave stuff unanswered. Do a couple things where I have to think about it and it's like, wait, what happened to blah, blah, blah? And then don't do blatant shit like that.
They did that in this film.
That is a problem. That is in itself a problem. That shit works for TV shows. Right? When are you going to find out, Ricardo? Next week. Great. Not 2 years from now. Prometheus have that same problem. Prometheus had that exact same problem. I set unanswered questions, and then you know, he's all these douchebags who come online who tell you, oh, you know, well, they're gonna answer it in this, and don't worry, the writers we know, and as if they're keeping this big secret from me. It's like, son, I won't care. I will stop caring. Good TV shows, and again, we live in an age where it's about the serialized binge watching TV shows that take over nowadays. We in the age of Orange is the New Black and True Detective, and we live in the age of Game of Thrones and things where you need serialized content and you need it now. I'm sorry, it is a spoiled brat argument. But it's no different from telling me, hey, how are you going to get to school? Ox cart or with the taxi? Or with your own car? Sorry, I live in the modern age. This is some ox cart bullshit. Right? It is too slow. It is too lazy in that way. It is, if you're telling a story, tell a proper complete story, make me enjoy this, and then say, all right, we're going to build from this in a smart way if you want a proper sequel. Again, I am actively rooting for this to fail financially because I do not want the same minds getting any more money and wasting it on this material. I am sorry. I cannot defend this movie in any real way. As a film, it does not work.
I think it does.
No, I'm sorry. It does not work. Matthew, square this because, dude, I had serious problems with this. By the way, my rating is a very low CC8. Go CC8 on a Tuesday. How much is CC8 on a Tuesday? $20?
20, 25.
Whatever. It's cheaper than the normal tickets. Go CC8 where they're kind of half drunk. Oh, by the way, take a beer or two. Get a little drunk. And speaking of that, Island beer. You can take a beer. By the way, just enjoy yourself. And look, the movie not intrinsically bad or anything like. You'll enjoy yourself, but it ain't for people like me, nerds like me who just nitpicky bullshitters like me. I don't admit it. Did I nitpick it? But dude, I need a standard. I need a standard of good storytelling, and this did not fulfill this criteria. It's a shame to see such good ideas squandered this way. It's just the pacing of everything. That's the problem. Everything does just 2 hours, and then we're gonna answer it in 2 movies or whatever, and they're just leaving things open. I have a problem with that. I have a serious problem with that. Low CC8, by the way. So, Matthew, just finish this off first.
All right. So, I agree with Ricardo in terms of the film's pacing. It is very, very, very fast. I mean, like, for example, the moment where we see, with John Connor returning to, as this Terminator. And then as soon as that's revealed, then it's just action piece after action piece over and over and over, right? And like I was hearing Ricardo saying what you were saying about pacing. I was thinking about the second movie, where yes, you had an action sequence, but then after that they would take like about 5-10 minutes, to let the story develop, to let characters breathe, interact, talk. And then from there you understand, motivations of the characters, you understand the story from a bigger perspective. This one is like, okay, when you're trying to understand what's going on, like, okay, the reveal is that John Connor is a Terminator. Big whoop, okay. And then there's some other action set piece takes place, and then something else happens, and then they have to go for guns, and then more things happen, There's not enough time for the story to breathe. One big thing that was revealed, unfortunately, and I was kind of hoping that the film would have done it, but unfortunately just kind of forgot it, is where exactly this old or new Terminator came from, the Arnold Schwarzenegger character. Yeah. It's No. You see things in the film. Sarah said that this new Terminator came for her when she was a little girl. But the issue is, where did it come from? Did Skynet send her? Did somebody from that future reprogram this Terminator to come and save her? And if so, why you come for her when she was young? I mean, from the first two movies, it's been implied that, it came for her when she was at a certain age, when she was at a certain maturity. But why when she was a little girl? It's never revealed. At first I thought, okay, maybe John did it. Maybe it was some kind of trap in the some trap that'll be revealed in the end. But no, it's not. Another thing that was a disappointment for me was the action set pieces themselves. I mean, the second movie, there were just so much great action sequences. One, for example, the oil tanker sequence. That's probably one of the best car chase sequences ever put to film. In this one, you have a car chase. Or no, I shouldn't say a car chase. So there's a school bus and. Yeah, there's a school bus, and Sarah's in it, and Kyle is in it, and Arnold is in it, and then John is chasing after them in a bike, and then the bus flips over, and wow, I mean, you've seen it in the trailer, big whoop, okay. But I mean, it doesn't stand out to me. Like, even when I'm talking about it right now, I'm just like barely remembering. I'm trying to like remember what happened and what was the big deal, but it's like it just happened. It just came and went, And then also too, there was a whole issue with the editing as well too. Just the way how it was paced, just the way how the action sequences themselves were paced. It just felt and looked like your average big budget action sci-fi movie. There wasn't anything that really stood out, like what really made it different. Like even in Dark Knight, for example. I mean, I'm not comparing Dark Knight to Terminator, of course, but Dark Knight, that sequence where Joker is in his truck and then Batman is in his car trying to chase after him. That was a brilliant, that was a well-paced, well-shot action sequence. This one with the bus I just mentioned, it just felt like you've seen these pieces before. It's just there to be like, oh wow, there's a bus flipping in the air, wow, and that's it. You forget about it, And yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the film having a lot of action. I mean, you can expect that now in these modern action movies, but there's not enough moments for you to kind of sit down and be like, okay, let me catch my breath. Let me drink some salt drink here. Let me try to understand the story. Let me really get the motivation of the characters. Like, yes, action is great, but if you don't care about the characters in the action piece, then it's just visual candy. It's just there just for the sake of being there. It doesn't really add any emotional weight to it. And yes, there's this whole thing about, okay, yes, we have to save the world from Skynet, but I mean, in the first two movies, especially in the second movie, you got the emotional sense of why was this so important? Why you should care about these characters? When this one is just like, all right, yeah, Arnold's doing his thing, Sarah's doing her thing, Kyle's doing his thing. Okay, John's a Terminator. He's kind of doing his thing. He's the antagonist now, but you don't really care. You don't really give a shit at the end of the day. So in case I don't come back to it, my rating is 2.5 out of 5. See it if you really have to. If you're a Terminator fan, if you like it for the action, or whether you just like mindless action, you will enjoy it for what it is. But if you're looking for intelligent storytelling, which, especially like in the second one, you're supposed to get from a Terminator movie. That's what really put Terminator 2 in that pinnacle, but you don't get in that. Unfortunately, they try a lot. I like the homages to the original 2 movies, and I like how they fixed the third and fourth ones. Like, the third and fourth didn't exist anymore. But still, you kind of come into a Terminator movie expecting a level of intensity and intelligence. And unfortunately, you don't get that. It's just, a PG-13 summer movie. It is what it is, So if you go into that, then you'll have fun. But if you're expecting more, I'm sorry, you're not going to get any more. So, yeah. But anyway, I'll put you on to Michael. He has his words to say.
Yeah, that was a lot to take in, and I don't agree with most of it. But I'll explain why, right? First of all, you were talking about the importance of the characters, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese. And I agree they're not as important in this story, but I don't think at this point they need to be, right? We are not looking at Terminator Genisys as an isolated film. It's not the first in the franchise. It has to be taken for what it is, which is the new T3, right? Okay. Which is what it is. No, understand what I'm saying? It erases 3 and 4, so it's the sequel to Terminator 2.
A comparison to that would have been like Jurassic World being a proper sequel to while Jurassic 2 and 3.
Let's not even talk about Jurassic World. I have my own thoughts on that. But anyway, right. If you look at it in the context of continuing the story from where Terminator 2 left off, I think a lot of the things you're talking about in terms of developing the characters and stuff becomes largely irrelevant because we know these characters. They have been around since 1984. We know these characters. We know their motivation. And all we really need to see is how they have changed, which is what the show does. And it doesn't have to spend a lot of time explaining that to you because it's pretty simple. We know Sarah Connor is the mother of John Connor. We know the Terminator was sent back to kill her. Actually, in this film, they even did say that the Skynet sent back a Terminator earlier when she was young, and that is why Guardian came and defended her, and that's why he met her when she was a child. The only thing they didn't say was who programmed him, and they also explained that. She said they didn't want any of them to know because then Skynet would know, right? So, but no, I'm just saying from a storytelling point of view, it's not like it wasn't addressed. It's not that they wait until the sequel to explain that, right? They don't have to explain it. It's not really necessary to the story to explain it, right? So I'm fine with stuff like that not being expressly written out in the storyline. And in terms of the action sequences, we live in a world of Fast and Furious, right? Yeah. Action is the new storytelling. You can't expect them to slow down every now and again to just give you pure story because audiences today tend to get bored with that a lot faster than they did back in the 80s, right? So to a certain extent, you have to expect them to put in a lot more action into their sequences. And in a lot of ways, I think they were smart in the way they did it because a lot of the action sequences reference either the first and second films or other action sequences from other films that were big, right? Like that bus sequence you're talking about, the early part of that bus sequence reminded me of Speed, right? Right. The flip over of the bus and hanging off the edge reminded me of Final Destination, right? Oh, yeah. There are references to other great films within this film, right? As particularly from a visual standpoint. It's not just the Terminator franchise that they borrowed from. And I'm fine with that, right? Because again, in this modern age where people have seen all these films and they have certain expectations for action, you actually cannot stop the action midway to give too much of a story because then people find that the story is slow and whatnot and they want you to get back to the action. So I think it was creative in the type of shots that they used for the action sequences that reference existing films. So it became easier for the audience to just accept them as what they are in the context of this story, right? That's how I felt. You don't have to agree. I'm just saying, right? I'll rate it shortly, right? You made me forget the other point I was now going to rate. Oh, right, yeah. In terms of what they did with the new characters, John Connor turned into a robot and whatnot. Yeah, I think that was fantastic in terms of, again, adding something new to the story, right? Showing Skynet in a different way, showing how Skynet was created in this alternate timeline, because that's another thing we keep forgetting. it's an alternate timeline. Things do not need to happen exactly the same way as they did in the previous two films, right? So I mean, even I think they rebooted even the whole idea of John Connor being the leader of the resistance, and they switched him with Kyle Reese because Sarah Connor now inspired Kyle Reese from an earlier age. So the story can go in multiple directions now, and I think that's fantastic in terms of the way they wrote it, where you can enjoy this film for the references to previous films, but still see all the potential of future films to come if they do make a sequel, right? Even if they don't make a sequel, I was satisfied with this, right? Now, in terms of rating, I would give this film probably a 4.8 out of 5. It's not perfect, but I think going in, it gave me more than I had expected, and my expectations were pretty high, right? Arguably, much better than Avengers Age of Ultron. And I actually did say on Facebook that Skynet and John Connor is a better Ultron than Ultron was, right? Much better. In terms of even the simple things like the fight sequences between Arnold Schwarzenegger and John Connor in the end, he used his abilities in a creative way, and it was visually stimulating, but it made sense as opposed to the way Ultron would have been fighting the Avengers, right? So, I mean, yes, you all could knock it for the pacing and the editing and whatever, but I think there's a lot of good stuff that was done in this film that we cannot ignore, and for what it is, it's not a standalone film, right? It's not necessarily even the first in the new trilogy, but what I think it is the removal of the missteps that were 3 and 4. And that's all I think it is, and that's all it needs to be. And if people appreciate that and we get a new trilogy out of it, then great, because I think there's tremendous potential for where it can go from here. Right?
Yes, boy. Yeah, all right. No, okay. So no, yeah, as I say, I agree with you in the sense that it had a lot of great stuff in it. As I said, but to me, it was more wrong format. That's really what it boils down to, in my opinion. Seriously, this really felt like, taking a bike on the bus route, where you could take the maxi. It's just a very, very poor way, very, very poor way to address how to deal with this material, how to really write it, and you get a really bad filter of great ideas into a poor format. That's how this entire project came across, for me. So that's just my thing. So I think we could wrap up with that one. Once again, we'll just like to thank Island Beer, Chill and Grill, awesome place, nice little spot, and have a beer after. And again, I recommend coming to the place. Take a little lime right on the IMAX, for adults, of course, but it's there. Matthew, once again, where can we on the internet contact you? We'll do it once again on the show.
All right, I have my own blog page at Legally Black, at legallyBlack.wordpress.com. You could see my previous reviews as well too. We'll also be posting the podcast as well. Also too, you could actually search for the page too on Facebook. Just type a Legally Black blog fan page. It's right there. So if you have any comments on the actual film, because I'd like to hear what you thought about it. If you liked it or you hated it or whatever, just drop a comment. Let me know what you think.
You could get me on Twitter at rmedi. You could also get me on Facebook. Just type in Ricardo Medina. It is the 47th most important Ricardo Medina on the planet. But yeah, you'll probably catch me. You'll see me in this ridiculously tacky peach suit. It's my intention. And yeah, you could contact me and then yell at me in all caps on the internet about this, about my opinions and my negativity. Michael, where can we contact you?
You can reach me on my website, fasttrackvfx.com. That's PHASTRAQVFX.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, pretty much every other social network. Just search for Fast Track. It's a very unique name. And we could get together and form a posse to beat these two guys who have ridiculous opinions about this movie.
We're just going to a quick wrap up of the podcast here. Good evening, good night, good morning, whenever you're listening to this. Thanks for everything. We'll be following up with the next set of films. We have a couple of films coming up. There is Ant-Man, which is the wrapping up of the second phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I am very excited for. Hopefully it will be not as drab and downtrodden as Age of Ultron was. But I really expect this film to be. I'm really excited for this one. Frankly, for a character who is what, a third tier, fourth tier Marvel character. How low is he on the roster of Marvel rank? He's pretty low. And it's interesting to see that narrative play out of people really excited over Ant-Man. Like, again, you just fast. Let's just rewind the clock, back to 2007. And, people will be really talking about excited about Ant-Man film. I'll be like, what? They make an Ant-Man movie? That attitude. Yeah, no, but seriously. This is the next film hopefully we'll be doing. Matthew and I will be coming to IMAX to see it. And we'll have Michael as well, hopefully. Yeah, no, we'll just take, we'll deal with that. And yeah, so any last words, Matthew? Any last words, Michael? No? Cool. Yeah, goodbye. Thanks for everyone. Thank you for listening, everyone. And that's it. Later. Peace.